2 of the April 4th Board of County Commissioners regular meeting. Welcome to Harris Hall. We'll move directly into the agenda today. We have a first reading, item 11A on the agenda, a first reading and setting of the second reading and public hearing on Ordinance 2302 in the matter of amending Lane Code Chapter 15, roads, to enable right-of-way setbacks to be established in a board-approved design concept, and to remove the additional setback requirements from the eastern portion of Blue River Drive and recognize the platted rights-of-way as planned right-of-way for building setbacks in the downtown portion of the Blue River community and declaring an emergency. Now, for anybody watching online, if you click on View Material, then you will you'll see all of the items from this particular agenda item. And Becky, I'm scrambling just for a second here to get my script, which I know you sent to me. So, Ms. Malkreisky, I'll ask you to introduce your panel.
Thank you, Chair. We all know Becky Taylor, our Senior Transportation Planner, is here to present this item. Thanks, Becky.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Farr, Commissioners. So I'm Becky Taylor. I'm a Senior Transportation Planner with Lane County. And this is just a first reading to set the public hearing date on some proposed code amendments. The code amendments would modify the minimum right-of-way and setback requirements in Chapter 15 roads so that structures in the older portion of the Blue River community can be rebuilt in a reasonable way on the same lots. And a detailed explanation of the code amendments will be provided during the staff portion of the presentation at the public hearing. We're requesting that the board set the public hearing date today. We're recommending April 25th as the hearing date. And this needs to be a time certain item so that we can provide notice of the public hearing, and we're requesting 1:30 p.m.
Right on. Any discussion, any questions from the board? Then this is just a first reading setting the second reading, so my script was pretty short. That was about it. But before I ask for a motion, perfunctorily, if you don't mind, Becky Taylor is with us, and I'd like to remind everyone that in 2016, Becky Taylor was the outstanding public employee for Lane County. Congratulations.
It's a privilege to work for Lane County.
I was there the night that you got that award, and it was a big deal. So thank you. So with that, do I have a motion? Vice Chair Trieger.
No, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Would you like to make a motion?
I would like that, thank you.
Commissioner Buck.
I'll move approval of the first reading and setting the second reading and public hearing for ordinance 23-02 as presented for April 25th, 2023 at 1:30 p.m. time certain.
I'll second.
Moved by Commissioner Buck and seconded by Vice Chair Trieger. The first reading and setting the second reading. Discussion to the motion. I'm seeing none, then I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Passes unanimously. Thank you, Ms. Taylor.
Thank you so much.
Then we'll move on to item 11B, which is Order 230404-09 in the matter of appointing Marcus Lay as an at-large member to the Lane County Planning Commission. And Ms. Surslev, you and I have been passing on the street all day long, it seems, so welcome to Harris Hall.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Farr and Commissioners. For the record, I'm Rachel Surslev, Lane County Land Management Division, a senior planner. And I'm here before you today for the appointment of one new member to the Lane County Planning Commission. This vacancy became available due to the resignation of Planning Commissioner Kathy Smith on December 14th, 2020. And on January 31st, 2023, the board appointed a subcommittee consisting of Commissioner Buck and Commissioner Senega to conduct interviews with candidates to fill this position. And the subcommittee interviewed a total of 11 applicants who applied for the position. And out of the candidates that were interviewed, Marcus Lay was chosen as a finalist. And so the subcommittee and staff recommend that the board appoint Marcus Lay to the Planning Commission for the continuation of Kathy Smith's term on the Planning Commission. And that concludes my report.
Excellent. Discussion from the board to either of the members of the selection committee? No. Looks like we just are waiting for a motion. Would you like to make the motion, Commissioner Buck?
Sure. I'll move approval of order 23-04-04-09 as presented.
I'll second.
Moved by Commissioner Buck and seconded by Vice Chair Trieger. Discussion to the motion. I'm seeing no discussion to the motion. I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Passes unanimously. Thank you, Ms. Surslev. I'll see you at the corner of 7th and High. Okay, which is the last place we met. All right, we'll move down the agenda into item 11C, which is a discussion of the short and long-term options for allowing emergency overnight camping within the urban growth boundaries of Eugene and Springfield. And Mr. Mukherjee, I'm going to ask you to introduce your panel, even though I've already introduced your panel one time. Step on your toes, I might add.
This is Rachel Surslov, our senior planner in transportation, not in transportation, I'm sorry, that was Becky, in public works, land management.
Thank you.
Yes, still me. Thank you, Chair Farr.
Fancy seeing you here.
Hi, Commissioners. So again, Rachel Surslov, Senior Planner in the Land Management Division. And I'm here this afternoon to discuss with you short and long-term options for allowing emergency overnight sleeping within urban growth boundaries of Eugene and Springfield. For some background on this topic, in October of 2022, the Land Management Division staff were before you to present options for variances to allow occupied recreational vehicles, or RVs, on Eugene urbanizable lands. And urbanizable lands are lands within the urban growth boundaries, but outside of city limits. And at that work session, staff were not able to identify any variance options for that specific use of allowing occupied RVs. And so the board directed staff to investigate other options to allow overnight sleeping within the urban growth boundaries of both Eugene and Springfield. So I'm back before you today to discuss those items, and the agenda cover memo for this item separates the options for Eugene and Springfield because the cities vary in how they have addressed RVs within their urban growth boundaries to date. So I'm first going to discuss Eugene, how Eugene has approached occupied RVs within their urban growth boundaries so far. And within the city limits of Eugene, camping is allowed on private property in residential zoning districts. And that allowance, the allowance for that use is established through the city's land use code and also the municipal code, which does not apply to the urbanizable lands, which are those lands between the urban growth boundary and the municipal city limits. So urbanizable lands are actually technically county lands, but the county and the city of Eugene have an intergovernmental agreement in which the city administers land use and building regulations and also enforcement of those regulations within the urban growth boundary. And so while Eugene administers land use codes in those areas, the city's municipal code does not apply in those urbanizable areas, and lane code actually applies in those urbanizable areas. So however, the crux of the issue here is that lane code does not contain the standards for permitted overnight sleeping, and the city has determined that the use thus is not allowed within the urban growth boundary on those urbanizable lands. And so one option that staff has identified for allowing camping within the UGB and outside of the city limits in Eugene is to do an amendment to lane code to adopt specific standards that permit overnight sleeping within the UGB. So that's the one option for Eugene. Springfield has taken a slightly different approach for allowing occupied RVs within the urban growth boundary. So Springfield's development code does not currently allow for occupied RVs. However, the Springfield City Council has passed 2 resolutions that suspend enforcement of RVs on private property. And the City Council has decided to, or did decide to suspend enforcement on those RVs for several reasons, from issues resulting from the Holiday Farm fire, COVID-19, and the regional housing shortage. So staff and Lane County Legal Counsel have reviewed those resolutions, and due to the intergovernmental agreement that Lane County has with Springfield, that transfers enforcement of land use regulations to the city of Springfield. We do believe that the resolutions actually apply to all areas within the urban growth boundary of Springfield, and no action would be required to stop enforcement on occupied RVs within the urban growth boundaries of Springfield. And I will note that those resolutions indicate that the Springfield City Council will review the impact of the resolutions in 2023 and determine how to move forward. May that be with land use code amendments or revisions to the guidelines that are associated with those resolutions for citing RVs. Or if the resolutions should remain in effect at all. So county staff will be continuing to collaborate with City of Springfield staff and monitor the City Council's future action on those resolutions. And we'll determine if the board needs to, if that item needs to come back before the board to take any action to allow those RVs. So that concludes my summary of the options laid out for both Eugene and Springfield, and that concludes my report. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Excellent. And I see the alternatives that were presented to us is one is to amend the lane code to be consistent with Eugene Codes 4.816 for permitted overnight sleeping or take no action. So I'll look for discussion questions from the board. Vice Chair Trieger.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation. My only question, it's really a comment, is there's mostly consistency in using the word sleeping versus camping, but every now and then the word camping goes in there. And if there isn't any reason that I'm not aware of, I would prefer that we keep the term overnight sleeping and not camping. There's a different implication and to me a different sort of motivation for this. So I don't know if there's anything in language in your world that differentiates those two, but consistency is the most important. And for me, the preference of consistency is use the term overnight sleeping.
If I could respond,
Please, yeah.
Jennifer. I do believe that camping or campsites might be defined in, I believe in Eugene's municipal code that outlines the standards. I do believe use the term camping, but I believe that the board's assignment used the term overnight sleeping. So we will be as consistent as possible in using that term if that's the preference of the board.
That could be a concern, okay. Very good. Further questions or comments? Commissioner Siniga.
I just had one. During the Holiday Farm Fire, I was involved in making a temporary spot for RVs for people to come to, and we actually had room for about 60 RVs, but between the county and the city, just weren't able to put it together. This is what's going to fix that, correct? So we're all on the same page.
So this item is regarding, I believe it's an allowance for one campsite on a residential zoned private property. So we're not talking about sites that allow for multiple campsites. This is really when you have a residential property and you know of, say, a family that's in need of a place to camp, it would be allowing that family to camp on your property.
Gotcha. So one RV per one private. Gotcha.
Commissioner Buck.
Thank you, Chair. I think moving forward with this adjustment will help align some issues that we see of folks that may live across the street from somebody that's in the city, but are technically on county land. And so people can look across the street and see somebody's able to house somebody in an RV, say in their driveway, but across the street, they're not going to be able to. And this also, and I was sharing with Commissioner Seneca earlier today, this stems from a conversation we had last year, where Commissioner Bozovich at the time was trying to assist somebody within his district that had an RV and there was some fencing and somebody complained, but was still technically in that ambiguous zoning for RVs. I would like to support adjusting our code to be as consistent as possible, knowing that they're going to, Eugene is going to expand into these zones eventually, and it would be consistent and it would be providing housing for people who need it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any further discussion? Commissioner Laval.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. As I'm kind of gargling this in my brain about if it's going to be a temporary fix or a permanent fix, I mean, everybody knows we're 16,000 houses behind and 10 years behind in building houses. Is this something that if we adopt the Eugene Amendment to Code, that this is something that happens all the time? I mean, in Springfield, you see, I just pulled up a couple of listings that today, if you were going to sleep in an RV in Springfield, there's 3 Airbnb sites that do this already. And so I guess my question is, if this is something that's permanent and we're adopting this as an amendment to the code, at what standard of enforcement, because part of the thing is peaceability, livability in a neighborhood, consistency with the neighborhood, blight, all these kinds of concerns that neighbors have. How is it we as a county or a city going to maintain, I guess, lack of better words, the rights and peaceability, livability of the neighborhood within this if it starts to unravel and get a little more prevalent than it is now?
Chair Farr, if I can respond. In my perspective, this is a short-term solution to allow some sort of interim housing for families that are in need. I don't believe that it's intended to be a long-term solution, but I would have to, obviously, we haven't gone through yet to do a full review of Eugene's code or really scoped the exact language that would be adopted into lane code. So I'm not aware if there's any specific time limit that's applied to the RVs, the occupied RVs being allowed. And I, just from my memory, I don't believe there is for Eugene, but that is something that we could look into as we develop the code if we were directed to do those lane code amendments.
Yeah, I think I would support that as long as we had some sort of a deadline, sunset, revisit, that wouldn't become just something that would just become permanent. We wouldn't see it again. So I think a temporary solution would be good.
Thank you, Commissioner. Further questions?
Do you have?
Commissioner Senator, go ahead.
I received a phone call from First Step in Florence recently, and they're trying to do the same thing as a nonprofit. They've people with private property outside of Florence that are wanting to. Is that something we could adopt and see what Florence is doing and expand this to other locations in Lane County?
As a part of this assignment, I did not look into what the city of Florence currently does for occupied RVs, but that is research that we could do if we're directed to look into this code amendment.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Then a couple of things. Whenever we have a different set of standards for neighbors who live across the street or next door to each other, it's pretty confusing for each person, especially if they see their neighbor doing something that they'd like to do, but they're not permitted to do it. And what makes it particularly confusing is when it's inside the city of Eugene's urban growth boundary, and the city of Eugene is enforcing the code, but it's our code they're enforcing. So the city of Eugene is enforcing 2 different codes in some cases in literally adjacent houses. And we went through this a couple of times over the last couple of years, and land use has been most accommodating in making things work on an individual basis. Each time somebody has an issue, you've found ways to make it work for them. And but this seems a step toward not having to find so many ways to make it work. We do have a little bit of consistency in this area, at least. So I agree with Commissioner Buck. The more we can be consistent with both cities that we share the urbanized area with that's outside the city limits, the more consistent we can be. It'd be wonderful if we could be consistent from the lighthouse to the top of the Three Sisters. But there's a whole lot of work would go into that. So consistency is important. So I'm in favor of option 1. Commissioner Buck.
Another question came to mind. Are we requiring, or is Eugene requiring the RVs to have a permit? Because I know that there's sometimes water and sanitation issues that we need to make sure that the property can actually be able to bear.
Yes, I do believe they obtain, or RVs within the city limits that are established, I do believe obtain some type of permit because there are standards related to sanitation and garbage in order to ensure those things.
So that begs the next question is how long are these permits for? Specifically getting at Commissioner Lovell's concern regarding the duration, because if those permits have certain timelines that need to be renewed, that could satisfy the issue regarding permanency.
That's something I would have to look into with scoping the specific code.
Thank you. Then just a couple more from me. We have to be sensitive to people's to neighbors' responses, of course, because we do everything that we can do to make our city and our county livable, a good place to live. And from time to time, you will get complaints on that. You know, even if it's inside of code, you'll get people complaining. Are we equipped to handle that, or is that something that we turn over completely to the city of Eugene also?
The City of Eugene also handles enforcement, so any complaint on these types of permits would go to the City of Eugene.
Okay, very good. And so this, you know, the old RV occupancy document from Springfield, the flyer that they put out, that had some really good guidelines in it. Some guidelines that really could be rubber stamped as applicable. You know, the RV must be roadworthy, must be drivable or towable, et cetera, et cetera. And I wonder, do we have anything, does the City of Eugene incorporate any of that kind of language?
Yes, so the City of Eugene has actually adopted that language into their municipal code. I have not reviewed in detail what exactly that code specifies, but it does include things like I mentioned, sanitary, attachment to sanitary system, making sure that there's some sort of plan for garbage and waste disposal.
And, you know, if it seems like I say this a lot, I say it a lot because it's something very, very good that we did, and I'm very proud of the work that we did from 1996 to 1998. The Council Committee on Youth and Homelessness and Youth it was called. And out of that committee, it was a 3-year-long committee, which was me and Nancy Nathanson and Sean Bowles were the 3 people on that committee. We had that's where the Eugene camping ordinance at the time came from. It was the first ordinance of its type, and it really wrapped things up, saying it allowed for a single backyard dwelling as long as it had the sanitary facilities. And at the time, sanitary facilities could be inside the house or out. I think it was amended later to be completely separate from the house. It also allowed for a driveway use back in those days. It was a great ordinance, and it worked for a while, but until it became pretty evident that quite often the neighbors just simply don't like, and I said this earlier this same day, don't like what's on the other side of the fence. So we hear from them all the time, and quite often when we tell them, well, it's code, they're up to code, and say, well, can they play music at 1 a.m. loud? You know, so I guess at this point, we're trusting that the City of Eugene on county-controlled land will do the right thing, whatever the right thing may happen to be. Okay. All right, very good. Then do you need anything specific from us, or just a direction, option 1, regarding the Eugene, matching the Eugene ordinance and Springfield, just leave as is?
Yes, some direction from the board would be great on Eugene.
Is what I just said okay?
Yeah, that's
All right.
perfect.
Then so in this option 1, as outlined in our agenda item today, for the city, directed toward the City of Eugene of the City of Springfield, laissez-faire. Okay. Yes.
Would it be possible, one more comment, I'm in agreement with the option 1 of Eugene. I think we just need a date to review it in the future. I think just having it done and rubber stamped and out of our way and down the river, I think is not the prudent approach for the future. I think if we're going to revisit this, we need to revisit it in maybe a year or 2 so that we can align it to the goals that maybe we're shifting in housing and needs and be a little more nimble in that. That's my concern.
Could we maybe just set April of 2024 as a review date for it, for this?
Sure. My suggestion, I suppose, would be that now that we have direction from the board to initiate this code amendment, it will be coming back before you. So you'll actually be able to review what code is going to be adopted before you adopt it. And I think at that time, it would be prudent to have a discussion on if you wanted to have some sort of sunset clause or if you wanted to set a specific date to review it at that time.
Yeah, great, thank you.
And that covers your concern,
Yep.
Commissioner? Excellent. Then do you have all the direction that you need?
Yes, I do. Thank
Excellent.
you.
Thanks for being here this afternoon.
Thanks.
And that agenda item is concluded. So we'll move down the agenda. Commissioners' business announcements from commissioners. Item 12A, Commissioner Buck.
Thank you, Chair. Tomorrow morning at 10 a.m., we are having a celebration down at our brand-new location for a federally qualified health center in Cottage Grove with Representative Val Hoyle and the USDA Undersecretary Torres Small, celebrating both federal and USDA grant investment in the property. You're all welcome to come if you're able to make the time. And it will it will start at 10, probably last an hour or so, but there will also be another opportunity to come down in the grand opening a little bit later.
And join them for breakfast at 9, I think, is maybe a select group of invitees that have the breakfast at 9, but that's on the agenda, or at least it's on my agenda, so. Very good. And Ms. Mokraski, when did we start working on that? It seems like it's been 7 or 8 years that we've been working on the Cottage Grove, since when we first bought the land down there, and,
Years, yeah.
yeah, so a long time. I remember, boy, I'll tell, when we first started looking at that, it seemed like a good idea, and I thought, boy, next spring we'll have that open. Well, this must be next spring already. Okay. Well, very good. Thank you, Commissioner Buck. Further announcements? All right, I'm seeing no further announcements. Then any future board assignment requests? Commissioner Buck.
Thank you, Chair. Well, some of us were out in spring break last week. I came back to a plethora of emails, one of which was some recommendations from our Lynn County Public Health Advisory Committee, specifically regarding adverse childhood experiences. I was able to review it. I have to say, I have not seen, I think, in all the years I've been commissioner, that advisory group come back kind of off regular schedule to come and give us some timely recommendations. So what I'm asking is if we could schedule a work session to review it as a group and see what we can or cannot do. There's a couple of items specifically that they expressed some support for some bills, but that may be best with the legislative committee right now, since we're currently in leg season to address, but just a work session to review all their recommendations, I think would be prudent.
Excellent. I served as the liaison to the Public Health Advisory for a number of years, and you're right. We've not had a regular report back. Now, the Public Health Advisory Committee is not statutory. The Mental Health Advisory Committee and the local Drug Alcohol Policy Committee, same committee, is statutory. And for the last few months, I've been given short reports on MHAC, LDPAC. And I think, Ms. Mokraski, I'd like to tag along with that both physical health and mental health, periodically, we have just a catch-up. Now, I've told the Mental Health Advisory Committee that each Tuesday after their Thursday previous meeting, I'll give a short report on what happened at that meeting. But during the legislative session, things are particularly interesting because the people on those committees take their work very, very seriously, both public health and mental health. So I think that may be something to talk to staff about and see how frequently they could do that and how frequently it'd be advisable. But in the meantime, I'm going to continue to give a short report on mental health advisory the Tuesdays following the Thursday meetings. So that's a head nod for me on yours, Commissioner Buck. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm loving this conversation. It's one of those things I've brought up periodically about the role of our committees, both how we structure them, how we recruit for them, how we support them, and they are advisory to us as a board. And I appreciate Commissioner Buck as the liaison to this committee, the subgroup that's been working on the ACEs report. I think would love to know that we're reading their report and want to hear more. Updates from our committees is really important, and particularly, as you've been mentioning, Commissioner Farr, Chair Farr, about the Mental Health Advisory. But as Commissioner Buck mentioned, this has very specific policy recommendations, some of which are state legislation that we could be weighing in on, some may be operational policy within the county. So I'm just more planting a seed as we continue to have these conversations about the roles of our committees and how they are an opportunity to deepen our work and get support and input from the community, from constituents, from lay people who are also subject matter experts, and how we take their advisory recommendations. So just sort of planting that seed to maybe think about and talk about at an agenda setting meeting sometime about whether we want to start building in some regular committee reports or recommendations, whether we prioritize it with the mandatory statutory committees, I don't know. I'm just sort of thinking out loud. And I think you're right, Commissioner Buck, there are some specific pieces of legislation in here that didn't come through the legislative committee just because of timing. So that's another thing to be thinking about, getting out in front of the timing for things like ledge session, other meetings in the community, our meetings, and basically how we can be making the most of our committees and their advice.
That's seems it's becoming a little bit more general in the request, I think, Ms. Mokrajewski. I think generally speaking for our committees, it's not a bad idea that we get a report back from time to time, depending on the nature of the committee. Some of them, because they have specific tasks, like the Parks Advisory Committee, they'll come back with reports. And Alex Kyler, who's our Government Affairs Manager, among other things, regularly attends the meetings of the Mental Health Advisory Committee and gives updates, particularly this time of the year. So our next meeting, he's going to give an update on mental health related things that are in the current legislative session. Probably wouldn't be bad for public health to do the same thing. But we have others. Another one that is statutory is our Community Health Council, for instance, which is the group of stipended members of the Community Health Council who are the council that's required council that oversee our 6, soon to be 7, community health centers. And I've been liaison to that for just about all of these 10 years. And, just little reports back from time to time. It not only informs us, it makes them understand and feel that their work is significant and is being heard. And these committees aren't easy to work on, and they're not at particularly fun times of the day, after a full day of work for a lot of the people. So I'm with you all on that. Let's take a general look at our committees and see which ones it is pertinent to have a report back, and which ones it could just be a quick report from the commissioner who's the liaison. Some committees that may be quite adequate. So,
I just ask for a summary of
Yeah,
that when you
that's-
kind of complete your discussion.
I'm going to ask you to make the summary, Commissioner Book, since it was your original question that's been kind of talked around, but Vice Chair Trieger.
Well, I was just thinking maybe it's two assignments. I mean, I think there's one very specifically about the ACEs report from the Public Health Advisory, and then there's some kind of assignment to wordsmith around committee report backs.
So the original one that I'm bringing forward today is for us to have a work session regarding our Public Health Advisory Committee's recommendations for adverse childhood experience issues. That's specific to the one I brought for today. And the second one regarding just callbacks for what's happening in our various groups, because I think a month or two ago, I may have mentioned that we're all on various committees, but we don't always have the time to go to every single committee. That's why they're broken up amongst us all. But I do get curious about, what's the update in somebody else's committee? Because even though I'm not on it, I'm interested in the subjects, and maybe discussing how we want to be able to incorporate that into our future agendas.
Did that summarize all right?
Yeah, sorry, I think I'm just struggling with the second one on and I'm thinking about who to assign that to.
Maybe that's just an agenda team review.
Yeah, let's do that.
That's what I
wanna
think,
start there?
and,
Okay.
yeah, and I have some thoughts, maybe just offline, just sort of brainstorm and think out loud how to turn that into something and then bring it back as a more fully formed actual assignment.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, one of the challenges we have with our advisory boards and committees is we don't have one staff person.
Right.
We have, probably 15 or 20 staff people that, that staff those various advisory committees. And it is a challenge because there's variation in how that work is done and what is required in terms of reports back and everything. So when we think about our advisory committees, we almost have to think about them as a lot of separate advisory committees that are doing a lot of important work, that information is coming to various staff people. And so when you want to report back or sort of coordinated thing, we just have to sort of think about how best to do that.
And it might be as simple as a memo to the staff person in charge of that committee. How would it be best for your committee to present itself? I'll leave that up to you completely, Ms. Mokrajewski.
Yeah, and we can, because again, it intersects with other issues around the mechanisms of committees and our processes for recruiting and the application process and all the things. So maybe we can just have a little bit more of a freewheeling conversation about it and then see if we can hone in on a more specific
Time
assignment.
seems good for that. And I'll clarify, when I say statutory, it's not necessarily that it's in statute, but there is some governing agency that requires us to have that committee. For MHAC, it's It's the state of Oregon, I believe, for public health advisory. It's not statutory, so we're not required to have it, other than it's a good idea. And Poverty and Homelessness Board is statutory because we have two different functions that are directly required by HUD. So I say statutory, that's just a general catch-all. So is it clear then, Ms. Mokryski? Is that good?
I think so.
Right. And when you write it down, send me a note, okay?
We're about to find out.
Then I have one. Any further requests? Mine's simple and very timely. I'm going to request that at our April 24th meeting, we have a color guard. The color guard is the Coast Guard Auxiliary Color Guard, has asked if we would entertain them to commemorate Safe Voting Week. Sometimes it's actually called, Safe Elections Week. And sometimes it's called, Safe Voting Week. Okay, so
This is the Coast Guard?
it's a Coast Guard Auxiliary. So what I'm asking is that right after we gavel in on the 24th, we just have a presentation of the colors by the Coast Guard Auxiliary. Probably a 5-minute agenda item.
Not to be confused with Safe Boating Week.
Definitely not. This is definitely for elections. And
I checked with our clerk at the break, and she was not familiar with that, so we were scrambling to sort of figure out what that was about and thought it was
it is April 20th
Safe
to
Boating
27th.
Week, but it is Safe Voting Week that you're referring to.
Not voting, and it's September 20th to 27th. And I've received I'll be a friend, General Norman Hoffman, Brigadier General Norman Hoffman has asked me if we would bring this forward.
Is it voting with a B?
No, it's voting, elections. And let me see if I can,
With Victor.
safe,
I was trying to look it up, too.
Yeah.
well, let's see.
I wasn't aware the Coast Guard was actively involved in Safe Voting Week.
No, they're not. They're involved in carrying the U.S. flag and its auxiliary banners, So it's simply a presentation of the colors. Yep.
Can we have a conversation while people are looking to see if
Yeah.
how widely known this is? I wonder if it's a lovely offer, and it sounds like it would be a really exciting and interesting thing to incorporate into our meeting. I wonder if there isn't a more standardly recognized opportunity to bring them in. It's not too far off from, for instance, Flag Day or Memorial Day or something like that, that we might, if they're offering to come and literally and figuratively add some color to our meeting, whether we might want to think about, whether it's a matter of timing more than whether they come or they don't come. I'm fully supportive of them coming to do that.
I appreciate that sentiment, but I'm going to hold fast on this particular one because it was a direct request. And if I cannot give you the exact name of the week, that is my fault.
You originally said April 24th.
It's our board meeting on the 24th. The week is 20th through 27. And I'm seeing nothing online about it. So I'll, we have a little bit of lead time between now and then, Ms. Mokryski. I'll get you an actual rundown on where that is documented as Safe Voting Week. And there is nothing online about it. So, and I'm red-faced with a lack of preparation.
Well, we meet next week.
We do meet next week, so we can definitely keep it timely by doing it next week. And I'm going to check one more thing really quickly. Any other announcements or agenda team requests? Then there's one more place I'll look. Okay. I'll have more information for you for the next week's meeting, Mr. Mokryski.
Okay.
All right. And, I would say yes to presentation of the colors at every single meeting, but I think that'd be a little bit, I'd also say yes to the flag salute every meeting, but we've gone that direction a few times before too, so. All right, anything else for today's agenda? Then I believe that is it for today, Mr. Mokryski. We're adjourned.
Oh, I was just going to review. Do you want me to review?
Oh, a
the
review of
assignments?
assignments, thank you.
So I think we're just doing the one request from Commissioner Buck to have the ACES report from the Public Health Advisory Committee brought to the board for a work session and discussion. We'll talk then as an agenda team about the committee reporting and information sharing separately, and then Commissioner Farr, we're going to bring your request back tomorrow with some more detail.
Yes,
Sorry, not tomorrow, next Tuesday.
yes, I will. All right. Anything else for the order of good of today's agenda? Then at 11 minutes past 2, we are adjourned.